All right, we're recording. All right, Dr. Stedman, are you going to kick us off? What are you going to cover tonight?
Yeah, we need to talk briefly about task one. Some of you have already very successfully turned in your task one, and just need to remind those that, because it is due by the end of this week as a draft copy. But some have already completed it, did a great job, but just need to remind people of the requirements. I think the research part, I think you pretty much got it. You know that each of those areas has to be addressed, a minimum of 3 references for each one. But the second part is where some still are, I don't know, there's 2 documents that you've got to have for task 2 or prompt 2. One of them is, we said you could use your existing walkthrough another instrument used by your district or your school, as long as it was validated and reliable. And then we said that you've got to look at, as a second instrument, you've got to look at it's about the teacher in evidence 2, and you've got to create something that you're going to be able to get some information from the teachers. How do they feel about the teacher efficacy? How do they feel about their involvement with staff development and other things that empower them as teachers? And so that second instrument, and it doesn't have to be a long instrument, and I did remind you that all of you are involved with the teacher working conditions survey. There is actually a section on that teacher working conditions survey that could easily be turned into a survey, Dr. Lamb, that they could revisit with some of their staff. But you've got to get your thumb on the pulse of how do teachers actually feel in your school about being empowered as a teacher leader in the school. You're creating the instrument now, and then we're going to talk about in a few minutes how you're going to take that instrument and you're going to get some information that you can use for the action plan that's going to come in task 3. Just be reminded there's 2 things that you're doing in prompt number 2, and we should see 2 things. I need to remind you too that at this point, take your time and let me see what Jody's saying. Can that second tool be a survey? Yes, Jody, it can be a survey, and we talked about that last week. Remember, Dr. Lamb talked about how you could go even into SurveyMonkey, and you could do it virtually that way. Yes, you can create questions from what your research says. Yes, that's the whole purpose of the research. What does the research say, and align what you do with what the research says in prompt 1. But make sure that you don't just put the 2 instruments there. Whatever you do, that you've got to say something about them. You've got to talk about briefly, not in a just a short narrative about how is that instrument validated, how is it reliable, something about is it research-based, how is it research-based. If your system is using it, then the assumption is that that they've done their homework and that it is research-based. But we need to know that it's adopted by your school system, or it is. Many of the South Carolina students, they use something that has been approved by the state of South Carolina, and I've seen that. But at this point, remember that when you're doing your research and you're doing your narrative work, take your time and don't submit anything until you know that you've given it a cursory look for the referencing and the proper APA citations. I shouldn't have to go back and for the most part, I shouldn't have to go back and say everything with the APTEL that I said with the APSL. So please make sure that you're taking time and that you're spending the time before you send it so that I'm not having to look at those kinds of things. One more thing is that, you know, with every one of the tasks and all the evidences, make sure you're not leaving out the appendices if applicable. Remember that you're supposed to continue to work with your administration, work with your PLC for the most part. So you need to show evidence, you know, that that you're not working on an island by yourself, that you are working with them. And for the most part, a minimum evidence would be an agenda showing that you are continuing to work with your team as applicable. So make sure that you are not leaving out the appendices when that is when it's applicable. So just remember that. Dr. Lamb, anything about the APTO prompt 1 that you need to say anything about?
Just to remind them again, it says clearly here, teacher empowerment and leadership best practice. Teacher empowerment is in your classroom, empowerment as a classroom leader. Leadership best practices is empowerment as a school-wide leader. I have an example of both of those in the APTEL template. The first one is from Todd Whitaker. This is empowerment as a school leader. You get to do things like teach other teachers, be involved in the school improvement plan, be involved in curriculum, be involved in budget, be involved in hiring. And then examples, and this is probably what your walkthrough is based off of, is Marzano's best practices. But, you know, these are two different things. Now, they work together. Here's the overall notion is that we want to create a culture and climate in our schools where teaching is a pride. Great teaching is prized more than anything else, and that our greatest teachers get to be our school leaders as teacher leaders. That our best teachers are on the curriculum committee, our best teachers are on the school improvement team, our best teachers are the people sitting on the hiring panels doing interviews, not the people who roll the ball out. That's the notion here. If you want to create a culture of teaching and learning, it has to start with being empowered as a great classroom leader and then using those people for your school leadership positions and not being your friends or your buddies or the famous eeny, meeny, miny, mo process of picking people for those leadership roles. There has to be a reason why that you get picked for those roles or that you pick teachers for those roles. And that's what we're trying to get you to understand, that when you get your shot in leadership, that if you want a building that's about teaching and learning, it doesn't happen by accident. You have to prize great teaching and reward it with school leadership positions. Let me say that one again and I'll be done. You have to prize great teaching and then reward that great teaching with school leadership positions. That's what we want you to do when you get your shot.
And Dr. Lamb, I told them when we first started this semester, I told you, I said, many of you are still in the classroom. And with the APSL, it was hard to do because, you know, you were working with the student aspect of things. But this time, remember I told you, I said, you've got to take that teacher hat off and you've got to put your principal hat on. This is really where it begins. You've got to begin looking at things differently than you've ever looked at it before. And, you know, and that means taking that teacher hat off and looking at things, you know, looking through the eyes of that principal that you are aspiring to be. So that's what we would expect at this point. Dr. Lamb, I think we could.
There's a question on the screen.
Okay.
APTEL Task 1 draft is due this Sunday night, April 1st. I had it in my calendar for April 8th.
It's April 8th. I'm sorry.
All right.
That's just, I forget that we've got Easter week coming up. So, but and the information that I sent out was, you know, we're not coming on next week as a Zoom session because it is, we deliberately did that, but that doesn't mean that you stop working. And, you know, I should see work coming in all along the way, and it shouldn't be April the 8th where I am seeing all of this stuff. We've deliberately given you this time so that you will have time to do a good job with all of this. Okay, thanks, Gretchen. Let's move on to task task 2, Dr. Lamb. Where did I put my information? Okay, here it is. Okay, and I sent you, after I sent your weekly update, I sent you a cheat sheet. I sent it to Dr. Lamb. We looked at it and we both liked it. But I sent you a cheat sheet for task 2, and and if you'll look at that, it will really help you understand exactly what you've got to do. You did your research in task 1. In task 2, you're going to actually do something, with the research and with the instruments that you've developed. And I'm actually looking at the information that I gave you using the 2 checklists, or the 2 instruments from task 1. You, the candidate, you're going to now collect data in the school to identify possible gaps between what the research says in task 1, what the research says should be happening, and then when you walk around your school, when you visit in classrooms, when you meet with your administration and they talk about with you and share with you walkthrough results and things of that nature, what is actually happening. You should have asked your administrator already, and if not, you need to spend some time with them asking for assistance with existing data concerning the walkthroughs that have already been conducted. That information is going to be important as you are looking at what is actually happening in your school and preparing for task 3, which is going to be the action plan. You need to ask permission, if you haven't done so, to participate in a minimum of 3 to 5 walkthroughs, and preferably, walk with your administration if they will allow it, your assistant principal, your principal. Some of you are already working in a coaching capacity, and I got some emails back on that. If you're already in that capacity, then that doesn't apply. You do that anyway, so you use what you're doing. One of you sent and said that your assistant principals are going to allow you to become a part of the evaluation team for the rest of this semester. That's great. Tony shared that information with me. So, they would become a part of his PLC team for the rest of this semester because they are allowing him to work with them. So, it's going to be different for all of you, but you need to have permission from your administration before you go into somebody else's classroom and you visit. And and the kind thing to do is to let teachers know ahead of time that you are coming into their classroom, and don't catch them by surprise. Let them know what you're doing. You will also have gathered data from the 2nd instrument that deals with teacher empowerment as a leader in the school. And again, that question has already come up. That's more of a survey. You're dealing with the perceptions and the question of efficacy and how teachers actually feel about what is actually happening in the school as it relates to them as a teacher leader. You want to put your thumb on the pulse of this, and the research says this should be happening, but when you survey the teachers, what is actually happening, and that is going to be what you do in task 2 as well. Now, when you look at prompt number 1 for task 2, you're going to see the same areas listed as were researched in task 1. Dr. Lamb, you've got it up on the screen right now. Building efficacy and empowerment among staff is the first one. There's 5 of them. You researched those in task 1, and you cited a minimum of 3 references. You're looking at those same areas in task 2, but you're going to look at them differently. You'll see those same areas. You're to provide a narrative for each, but this time, what you're doing, you're discussing the identified gaps or the needs. You know, the research says this, but when you look at the data, when you do the walkthroughs, when you talk with administration, what is actually happening? What does it look like in your school as it relates to building efficacy and empowering among staff? What does it look like when it comes to results-oriented professional development? What does it actually look like with recruitment, placement, and mentoring of school staff? What does it look like with approaches for evaluation of school staff? And then finally, what does it look like with teacher leadership and decision making? You're going to write about that. This is where the rubber meets the road. You're going to write about what is actually happening and compare that to what the research says should be happening. You must have some dialogue with your administration, because information that they're going to provide you will help you with this as well. And again, just a narrative for each of those areas. Dr. Lamb, you got any comments on that?
Yeah, I'm going to answer a question here. I have a question here. So we need 3 to 5 walkthroughs and 3 to 5 teacher empowerment surveys. No on both. You do 3 to 5 walkthroughs just for the practice and for the experience. We want the data from all teacher walkthroughs. Right. And we want survey of all teachers. You got to, population and sample here, folks. There's no sense in pulling a sample out of a population as small as your school. We're not having you do walkthroughs as a sample of the population and basing your decisions on 3 to 5 walkthroughs. We're having you do those for the experience. You're going to ask your administration for all the walkthrough data on all the staff. They don't have to give it to you by name, and they can lump it together and generalize, what percent use these best practices. I mean, they can do that for you. But when you survey for opportunity to be teacher leaders, you survey everybody. But when you use walkthrough data, you do 3 to 5 yourself, but you use all the walkthrough data. What if there's minimal there's not minimal walkthrough data. They're required to do those. Now, they'll be able to estimate for you of the 9 high yield strategies. They'll be able to estimate for you pretty much a percentage of what teachers use each of those 9 from their walkthrough data. You don't have to see the data itself. You can just ask them how many teachers regularly use similarities and difference, how many teachers regularly use cooperative learning, how many teachers regularly give homework.
And Andrea, that was a good question. When you do your narrative work, if you actually interview your administration and they provide you, you would just simply say, based on an interview with my principal, he or she stated that the following, and you fill in the blanks, based on that. But the interview with your principal can be all telling. That they'll share a lot with you. You just say it like it happens in your school.
Mm-hmm. Now the question is, our school uses SLO as an evaluation as a primary tool. Well, but it's all based off of best practices. Whatever the best practices they've identified are. I just use Marzano as an example. Whatever, that SLO is your best practices. Can we use teacher work condition survey from 12, 14, and 16? You can. That'd be a nice comparison. But back to that's a good, that Chase has got a good one here. Sit down with your administration or administrative team and have them fill out your walkthrough tool in terms of the entire staff. Exactly. Have them give you a percentage. It may not be Marzano's 9. It may be SLO's, but they'll be able to tell you pretty much what percentage of faculty use those strategies, those best practices that they're looking for on whatever tool that they're using for walkthrough.
I just used the walkthrough sheet at my school. Yeah, Kelly, you can do that. Yes.
Yeah. Whatever that walkthrough tool that they use at your school, that's what they believe are best practices in your district or in your school. That's what they believe is best practices. We're trying to figure out what is the difference, the gap between the real and the ideal. And whatever best practices your school identifies and wants your teachers to be using, whether it's Marzano, McReal, whether it's SLOs, what are those best practices, and what percentage of your teachers actually do those best practices versus the ideal, which is all of them using them.
Remember last week I told you, or I provided you some information over the last couple of weeks, and I said when it comes to this, we're all going in the same direction, but all of you, or many of you, will approach it entirely differently because it's going to be based on what your school system has approved, what the culture of your school looks like. So, I'm going to look at things. I'm going to see things coming to me. It's not going to be a cookie cut pattern with all of this.
Pam's question is TWC data available for those years? Yes, it is.
And that's public knowledge too, Pam.
Yeah, it's available. It is.
Actually, if you go to your school website, your report card, it should have that information listed in there for your schools, or you can pull up the teacher working conditions information.
Okay. Is the survey the same as the checklist? No. No. The checklist is whatever your school uses as the walkthrough data. The survey should mirror that section from the teacher working conditions survey about teacher leadership.
Or these 5 areas that's listed under prompt 1 too. All of that is the same thing. Yes.
Yeah, you can use Whitaker's. Do you get an opportunity to be involved in delivering staff development? School improvement team. You can use Whitaker's 5. You can just survey those 5, or you can survey the section again from teacher working conditions survey. Let me go to teacher working conditions survey. Okay, here it is for 16. No, I don't want to take it. Okay, here's the previous results for 14 and 16, Pam. Under North Carolina teacher working conditions. All right, let's look at 16. We'll look at one of my former schools. And so what you would look at is these questions right here under teacher leadership. Here's a good survey right here. Teachers are recognized as educational experts, trusted to make professional decisions, encouraged to participate in school leadership roles, effective process group decisions, take steps to solve problems, are effective leaders in this school. Those kinds of things. I actually like Whitaker's better, because it asks about specific things that you've been involved in. Do you get to be involved in sitting on an interview committee for hiring decisions? Are you part of the budget? Are you part of the school improvement team? Are you part of curriculum? Or do you get to deliver staff development? I like Whitaker's, but you can use this one. This is where your survey comes from. It has nothing to do with the walkthrough data. That's measuring something else. Walkthrough data measures empowerment as a classroom leader. The survey measures empowerment as a school-wide leader. And what we're trying to do is draw the distinction that one leads to the other. What you're going to find is in a school where a lot of teachers are great classroom leaders, they're getting the opportunity to be school-wide leaders. And you're also going to find in schools where teachers don't get much of an opportunity to lead outside of their classroom, they don't do near as good a job in their classroom. That's the aha moment that we're hoping somewhere around the end of task 4 that you're going to arrive at. I kind of let the cat out of the bag here tonight, but that's the aha moment that we want from you. That if you're in a school that doesn't reward teachers with leadership positions because they're great teachers, you won't have many great teachers. We don't differentiate pay for great teaching in North or South Carolina. It's on a standard scale. The way that you reward people is through leadership positions. And if people don't get rewarded with those, they don't teach as hard. It's just a known fact. So the aha moment from the APTEL is, oh, if I want great teaching, I've got to reward those people in a way that's not, I got to compensate them. I can't do it monetarily. I compensate them with being a leader, being a decision maker. That's the reward that they get for great teaching. That's the secret of the APTEL. That's what we're trying to get you to do. All this work is for you to come to the aha moment. Oh, that's how I create an environment of teaching and learning in the building that I can't pay for the great, we walk down the hall and there's 3 teachers, me, Dr. Stedman, and Pam, and Pam's blowing our doors off, but me and Dr. Stedman get paid the same as she does on the same scale. But the way we reward Pam is that she gets to be on the school improvement team, or she gets to be on the hiring team. That's the notion here. So,
and again, those
different things.
And again, when you're going to learn that as you begin to do these things as an administrator for a teacher, that is what builds their efficacy. That improves efficacy in the school. And remember, when you are improving teacher efficacy and you're doing those things, the direct result is that you're improving student achievement, which is the end result of everything that we do. So
the back bounce is always student achievement. Always. An error has occurred.
Okay. So, Dr. Lamb, you ready for me to move on?
I am.
Okay, and again, remember in task 2, prompt 1, this is narrative work. You're writing about things. When you get to prompt number 2, everything that you write in prompt 1, you're going to graphically or visually display it in prompt 2. You're going to show us. In prompt 1, you write about it. In prompt 2, you're going to show us. And again, remember, if you show a chart, a table, a graph, you don't just stick something there. We have to know what we're looking at. There should be a narrative explaining, what is it we're looking at, and it should relate back to what you have said in prompt 1, and it should relate to the research that you've already done. So all of this should tie together. Dr. Lamb, anything you need to say about that part of it? I think it's pretty self-explained.
Yep.
You're going
on the screen right now. If you want to know where you can find 14 and 16 teachers working condition survey data, it's right here on the screen, teachingconditions.org/previous. And that'll pull up 2014 and 2016. For you South Carolina people, it will show you what the TWC looks like for North Carolina. All right, so using the instruments now, let me remind you, you cannot survey for classroom empowerment. You need to talk to your administration about your walkthrough data. If you survey teachers and ask them, do you use the best practices identified by this district, they'll all say, yes, I do. Otherwise, they're too dumb to teach. That's an IQ test.
I saw you shake your head up and down, Danielle.
You know they're going to tell you they all do, but you talk to your administration to see how many really do. That's what we're in. We're not interested in how it ought to be. We're interested in how it is. And what we're hoping to show you is, using your own school as an example, that if you're rewarding great teaching with leadership positions in your school, you'll get more great teaching. Until we ever figure out a system to reward our best teachers, which we've not figured that out yet anywhere. Until we have a better system in place where we can reward teachers financially, this is the best we can do as administrators, is to reward them with leadership positions. And that's what we're trying to teach you here.
Okay. Dr. Lamb, I think there's going to be some of them, because we're not coming online next week. I know some of them already. They're going to already be ready to move on to task 3, so I want to introduce that as well. And again, it's a growth plan. It's very similar to what you did with the APSL. Once you created the instruments and you did the research, created the instruments in task 1. In task 2, you actually you're taking the instruments and you're applying it to your school, and you're gathering the data, and you're going to show that data in prompt 2 of task 2. And what you're doing in task 3 is you are creating an action plan based on, now that you know what the research says that you need to be doing, as it relates to teacher leadership and those kinds of things. You actually know by now, when you complete task 2, what is actually happening in your school. You know the gaps. What are the gaps in there? This is what should be happening, but this is actually what's happening. So your job now is to create an action plan that is supposed to fill in the gap. You're supposed to fill in the gap. Okay, these are the things, based on what the research says, based on what I'm seeing. This is what the PLC and the administration and this is what the plan is going to be to make improvements in our school based on what should actually happen, something that you can fully implement. Now you see all of the areas in yellow. There are how many of them, Dr. Lamb? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's 10 of them. It starts with a for positive school environment. Guess what? That's going to be your subtopic, and you're going to narratively talk about what you can do. What is the vision for a positive school environment in your school? What can you do? You and your team are going to decide what is the vision for creating or improving the school environment to make it more positive. You're going to do the same thing, documentation to support identified needs. Based on the needs, what is the documentation that supports those needs? You're going to talk about that under this area. Then you're a list of strategic indicators of success. Specific short-term and long-term goals and objectives. What can you do now? What's going to take a little bit longer to do? You have to identify them, give some frames on that. Activities to address identified goals and objectives. And it goes on. You see everything that you can. And guess what's at the end, Dr. Lamb? That formative assessment criteria that we've already talked about in the APSL. All of these things have to be addressed. Then once you write about it, you're going to write about all these areas. Then guess what you do? Dr. Lamb has provided a wonderful template. You're going to take all of that and you're going to actually put it in graphically. You're going to show us the activity. When is it going to happen? Who's responsible for it? What are you going to need to get this done? What is the formative assessment method, with whatever the activity is? Summatively, how are you going to assess this? What is the goal? And then how are you going to know what is the indicator that you've accomplished what you need to accomplish? You're going to do that for all 10 of those areas. Dr. Lamb, I'll let you tag right now.
Let me catch up on questions.
Okay.
Is the specific activity in the chart the same things that are highlighted in yellow? No. The specific activities are what you're going to do to address the gaps that you find. This sets it up. Let me.
So what you do
this is the narrative. This is the written narrative. These are the activities that you're going to do to address the gaps that you found. We might have to have more staff development. We might have, school-wide, we might have to have more staff development one-on-one. We might have to have more staff development in PLCs on the best practices that our school has decided that we need. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. You know, first thing you do is you determine the gaps in what you want and what should be in terms of classroom empowerment. Who's using the identified best practices? You've got an idea from the walkthrough data. You can see what you need. Can we address this in PLCs? Do we need one-on-one mentoring? Can we do it in whole group staff development with the entire faculty? If only 4 or 5 people on your faculty aren't doing, say, non-linguistic representation, one of the 9 high-yield strategies from Marzano, say only 2 or 3 people on your faculty aren't doing that. You don't need whole group and all of that. You just need for those 2 or 3 people maybe work in a PLC or one-on-one to work on that. That's what we're talking about. Now, when you're talking about opportunities for empowerment, you need to come up with some school-wide empowerment. You need to come up with some suggestions or activities to get more people involved in school-wide empowerment roles. So we would expect to see some specific activities that address whatever best practices your school has identified as being the ones that they want to see. We want to see some specific activities that address those. And that staff development is either in the form of whole group, PLC work, or one-on-one coaching. If nobody on your faculty is using cooperative learning, which is one of Marzano's 9 high-yield strategies, and that's on the walkthrough checklist for your school, you might have to do some whole group staff development on that one if nobody is using it. Tell us how you're going to do it. This is a staff development model. Let me say that again. What you're doing here is a staff development model. How do you get your staff from where they are right now to where you desire them to be? What specific activities will get you there?
Dr. Lamb, and when you're doing your narrative work, let's go back, let's just say, for instance, the specific timeline of activities. A lot of what you do is not going to be able, you're not going to be able to start it until probably the next school year anyway at this point, a lot of it. You know, and this is a good way to plan. So it may be the 2018-2019 school year that you're looking at full implementation of this. Now, when you get down to your specific activities, that's where you break things down. You look at specific things, and over the course of that year, it may be at the beginning of the year that you do something with the beginning teacher program, you know, working with them. So the top part leads into the bottom part, and some of it may be redundant, but like Dr. Lamb said, it's 2 separate things.
All right. I've resisted doing this, but I'm going to do it anyway. All right, here we go. A vision for positive school environment. All right. What we're talking about here is creating, let me turn this off. Creating a All right, so that's the first one. A vision for what we're talking about here is creating a school culture and climate in which great teaching, which is called classroom empowerment, is valued and rewarded. That's what we're looking for. That's the vision. That's the first half. The second half is that our greatest teachers served in school leadership roles. You need to write more than that to kind of flesh those out. But that's the main ideas here. That's the vision that you're trying to create here for your school. All right. Documentation to support identified needs. That's where you narratively remind us of the results of your walkthrough data. So this is walkthrough data.
And your surveys.
And survey data. Okay. And then list of strategic. What are you looking for? Well, probably on walkthrough, we're looking for 100% of our teachers to be using best practices. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for 100% of teachers to utilize we're looking for all of our and serving a school-wide leadership role.
Right.
That's what we're looking for.
Right, Dr. Lamb. And with that one, when you have your established PLCs, is there a teacher in the group that's always a wallflower? They never say anything. They never lead or whatever. Those are the kinds of things that you're looking for, because the job is to pull them out and to help them become, emerge them into teacher leaders.
Short term is to move from 60 to 70% this year using our best practices. We can't go to 100 the first year. We can't go from 60 to 100 in the first year. Short term. Long term, we want to see everybody. Short term is where do we want to move people right now? Short term is we'd like to see, more people involved in leadership roles. Long term, we'd like to see all of our best teachers, but maybe this year it's 2 or 3. Short and long, where are we going to go? Activities to address identified goals. This is where this is your specific activities of your graphic organizer. I can't spell activities. ACTIVITIES.
And Dr. Lamb, they need to know that it's okay that we see some of the same things up there that we'll see down there. It's okay that we see it.
How are you going to communicate your progress to your vital stakeholders? That's in your staff development. The timeline of when you're going to conduct your staff development. Plan for stakeholder involvement and buy-in. What are you going to do? Again, you're going to have to work with these people to get them to understand what you're doing. Specific roles and responsibilities, who's going to do what, person's responsible, informative assessment criteria. Now, please remember, as of always, formative is a fidelity check. Is the staff development going as we intend? The summative assessment is do more teachers utilize best practices, do more teachers serve in leadership roles, and do test scores go up? But formative is fidelity check. It's a check on your staff development activities. Remember, there's 3 types of staff development activities that you can utilize. 1, whole group. That's when not many people have adopted. PLC, that's when more have adopted, or we need to specifically target certain best practices. One-on-one is when we have a person that's not very good at all and they need a coach. And you can use all three, one of the three, two of the three. You're probably better off to utilize all of the three. You're probably better off to utilize all of the three. Let me go to a question. All right. Clarification on the second bullet. The second bullet is documentation to support identified need. That's your data. You just refer back to your data from your walkthrough and your surveys. That's your documentation. That's, we could substitute the word data to support that. But I don't want you just to put numbers. I want you to tell us in a narrative form why we need to do what we need to do using your numbers. You need to learn to convey data both ways, both in a narrative form and in a visual form. That's what we're having you do there. Let me show you what my staff development plan would look like. It may take me a second to find it here. This is what mine would look like. All right, and I've got the timeline. Now I don't have it, obviously I don't have the people responsible because I'm not in the school anymore, but this is what mine would look like. I would start everybody off with whole group during the teacher work days. And the amount of time that I would have them in whole group would range from 30 minutes to the entire day, according to what percentage of our staff had adopted Marzano's 9 high yield strategies, how many of them were using it. If only a few were using it, my staff development would be all day long. If most of them were using it and there was only a few, maybe the new ones that weren't using it, we would only do 30 minutes. I'm not going to punish the many for the sins of the few. I'm not going to have the entire staff doing a whole day of staff development on Marzano when only the new people aren't using it. That's not an efficient use of time. And then I would start my PLC work immediately with the lowest of the specific of the 9 high yield strategies. Usually it's non-linguistic representation that nobody's using. I'd put that one in every PLC on a weekly or every other week basis. You got to come in and work on non-linguistic representation. And then for my beginning teachers, I'd start them with one-on-one mentors that are working with them on the 9 high yield strategies. So, and as you can see my plan here, and that it continues throughout the year. I add my people who are not adopting the high yield strategies, and it ends up with people going on action plans and non-renewal if they don't do better. This is what a legal plan has to look like. This is mine. I've actually put this in place, and I use this when I work with schools that are low performing. This is one of the things when I go in and they say, what are we going to do? Well, I can tell you what you're going to do. You're going to work on better teaching if you want better outcomes. If you want kids to learn more, you have to teach them more. And so, but you got to get the staff development directed to those people. And so what you're creating here is a staff development plan to address better teaching in your classes and rewarding the better teachers, creating a system or a culture and climate in a building where there is reward for teaching, for better teaching. And that reward is being a decision maker, being a teacher leader. You would think that people would be afraid for their job and that they'd be a better teacher simply to keep their job. That's not, you'll learn the hard way that just because you're paying them every month doesn't mean you're going to get their best. You have to inspire and motivate. You have to train them. You have to do staff development with them. You have to reward them extrinsically rather than with money. If you want the best out of your teaching faculty. You'd think that they're grown people, and if you're paying them, they'd do their best. Yeah. Yeah. I saw the Easter Bunny last Sunday too. I actually got a picture of her. But
and you sent it to me too.
I sent him one. I saw the Easter Bunny. I sent Dr. Stedman a picture of the Easter Bunny.
And Dr. Lamb, they need to understand here too, this is where, don't do staff development just for the sake of doing staff development. As the leader, as the instructional leader of your school, it goes back to that old cliche, you've got to inspect what you expect. Once you do this, you've got to make sure, and again, it goes back to what Dr. Lamb said, you've got to make sure that you inspect it with fidelity. Make sure that things are that is consistently happening, and that it's not just when you have an announced observation that these things are happening, but it's happening on a regular basis.
And that you inspect the staff development as well. Just because you pair somebody one-on-one doesn't mean that they're actually getting the coaching that they need. You need to find out what they're doing with those people. Just because you tell the PLCs, all right, this month we're working on cooperative learning, doesn't mean it's actually happening in your PLCs. You got to get out and check on it and make sure that information is being transmitted. You'd think that if you tell adults to go and do something, they would, but y'all are in the school business. It's not your first day. You know that doesn't always happen just because you tell them it ought to. If you want it to happen, you've got to go inspect it. You got to go see about it. That's formative assessment, fidelity check. Are the adults doing what you intend for them to do? Is the staff development being delivered that you've scheduled for them? You can't do it all yourself. One of the things that you're going to do, you're going to utilize some of your best teachers to teach this staff development. And that's the first level of being empowered as a school-wide leader, according to Todd Whitaker, is you teach other teachers. You have input into staff development. And so this gets them started on that track to being a school-wide leader. You take your best teachers, they work with your not best teachers. But again, please remember, you're developing here a staff development plan that utilizes whole group, PLC work, and one-on-one coaching. Those are the three models of staff development that we use in the school business. And you say, well, we don't have money. You don't have to have money for this model. You utilize the expertise that you have on your staff. You may have to, maybe if you're not using it at all, you may have to send somebody to get trained, send one person to a staff development or two people to a staff development. But most of the time, those things are already available in your district. That's why we had you work with your walkthrough instrument, because that's what's prized in your district. There's training provided by your district on those best practices according to your walkthrough instrument.
And Dr. Lamb, again, it goes back to, as you're empowering teachers, the train the trainer model is something that you should be thinking about, because, everybody can't go to this national conference, but you can send one person to go and to come back and to train your staff on the best practices that are out there.
That's correct. You utilize the people that you've got. If you've got somebody that does a great job with similarities and differences, questioning and cluing, you have them lead the staff development, or you have them lead the PLC. You have them doing the one-on-one coaching. You've got talent on your faculties. Everybody's not the village idiot. Just a normal distribution says you're going to have somebody that's better than average on your faculty. Use them, but you've got to identify who they are. That's the trick. That's where your walkthrough data comes in. Is identifying who your stars are, and you utilize them. This model doesn't cost a lot of money. And that's one of the reasons why we use this in low performing schools, is because they generally don't have a lot of money. That's one of the reasons why they're low performing. And usually by the time that we get there to assist them as a university team, if they had any resources, they've already exhausted them. That's why they called us, because we're free. So, but this is mine, and I've got my dates. I plug it in. What I want when I want it. This is the model that I work off of when I go out and work in low performing schools. This is real. I call it MTSS for teachers. It's a multi-tier system of support, just like for exceptional children. This is for exceptional teachers. Obviously, they're not being very successful. It's probably a derogatory term, but I don't view it as that. I consider them to be exceptional teachers. We just haven't unlocked their potential yet. And so it's a staff development model that you are creating here. If you will understand that, if you'll remember that, this becomes very easy once you realize, oh, I'm trying to improve the staff. So remember, you write each one of these bullets, you write a paragraph or two explaining, answering that prompt as to what you're going to do there or why you're doing what you're going to do. And then you summarize your specific activities right here, the activities to address these. That goes here and you flesh that out. Again, some of it will be redundant, but it's all in one place. And if you will continue to use this model, you'll thank me when you get to the SOP in the fall, because you're going to be asked to put together an entire school improvement plan. If you've got all your action, marketing, and growth plans, this is a staff development or growth plan, you simply, all you have to do in task 5 of the SOP is put all these together and you're done. If you use the same one all the way through. Now, if you want to do something different and a lot more creative than mine here, you just knock yourself out. But then you're going to have to be able to get it in some manageable form in task 5. You can do it the way that we're showing you now, and it take you, an hour or two, or you can spend a month on it. That's up to you. I'm sure you've got plenty of additional free time that you're not using, so knock yourself out.
Dr. Lamb, just they need to be reminded with that if the reference section is included, if you have references and the appendices as well. And this is one time you really need to make sure that you are involving your PLC and your administration with this task.
All right, one more time on formative versus summative. Formative is checking on the adults who are delivering the staff development in this case. You've got planned for a staff development this afternoon. You need to make sure that staff development's being delivered. If you're planning on staff development within PLCs, you need to drop by those PLCs and make sure that they're working on those individual best practices. You need to go in and check on that one-on-one mentoring. You need to go check on that. Formative is of the adults. It's a fidelity check to make sure that whatever staff development you got planned is actually being delivered. The summative assessment is, do we see when we do walkthroughs, do we see more teachers using best practices? Do we see more teachers being rewarded throughout the school with positions of leadership, our best teachers? And then eventually the ultimate summative evaluation is, do our test scores go up? We're not just doing this stuff to grind on teachers. We know that there is a direct correlation. The better classroom teacher you are, the more kids learn and the better that they are on assessments. Tests. Well, you can say, well, I don't know that I agree that tests show. I don't care if you agree or not. If you want to stay in the business, your kids have to perform. Otherwise, they'll find somebody else. The report card matters, or they wouldn't be publishing it. And your job wouldn't depend on it if it didn't matter. So, formative is making sure that whatever plan that we've got is being delivered with fidelity, that people are doing that staff development, whether it's whole group, one-on-one, or PLC. Summative is, do we see more teachers using best practices, and eventually does that will translate into better student achievement? That's the summative end. We want to see, rather than 60% of our teachers using best practices regularly, we want to see 100%. That should take our test scores up as well. As we improve the number of teachers using best practices, and that's why they're called best practices, because they get better test results. I mean, if we looked at Marzano, let me answer one more question here, and I'm going to go to a Marzano slide. All right. Yeah, the teacher implementing and using the professional development for best practices in the classroom is summative. That's correct. That increases our percentage on our walkthrough data of teachers using best practices. Yes, that would be summative. So if we looked at Marzano, and again, I may have to go to I may have to go somewhere else to pull it up, but I'll see if I've got it here. No, I don't. Of course I don't. Let me go somewhere else and pull it up right quick. Come on and load. There we go. Aha. Here we go. All right, so if you can see my screen, the reason why we call Marzano's best practices high yield strategies or best practices is that research has told us that teachers that use identifying similarities and differences can yield a 45 percentile gain in their students' test scores. Summarizing and note taking yields a 34% gain, 34 percentile gain. Reinforcing effort and providing recognition, 29. Homework and practice, 28. Non-linguistic representation, 27. Cooperative learning, 23. Setting objectives and providing feedback, 23. Generating and testing hypothesis, 23. And then question, clues, and advanced organizers yields a 22 percentile gain in student achievement. That's why we call them high yield strategies or best practices. So, the conceptual framework here is the more teachers we have using high yield strategies, whether they're Marzano's or whatever your state or district has identified as high yield strategies for your district, the more teachers use them, the better test scores turn out for students. It's kind of a duh. That's why we call them high yield strategies. That's why we want them employing these instructional techniques in their classroom. That's what we talk about being empowered as a classroom leader. You are an expert at utilizing these strategies that we know produce higher student achievement. If the student test scores didn't matter, we wouldn't keep score. And we wouldn't publish a state report card, and we wouldn't publish a school report card, and we wouldn't hire and fire principals and administrators on the basis of student achievement. If you're one of those people that doesn't agree with that, you're in the wrong business right now. There may be a day somewhere down the road where assessment is not so heavily prized, but it ain't today and it won't be tomorrow. This is the corner of the realm in our business. If you can't get achievement out of students, you can't stay in our business. So you have to have your teachers utilizing best practices, whether it's Marzano's or somebody else's. You have to have teachers using best practices. You'd think that they would want to use them normally. They don't. They're not the easiest things to do. They're not. A lot of times, it's not how they learn to teach. It's not how they want to do it. And so, again, just because you're paying them doesn't mean that they're going to be doing what they need to do. You need to make sure that you have a staff development plan. You're in there assessing what they're doing. You're doing walkthroughs to figure out if they're using best practices. And then you put a staff development or a growth plan in place to get them to where they're expert at using these strategies in their classroom, and they become empowered as classroom leaders. That's the notion here. Can I put this in the intern shell? Yes, I can. It's already in the general shell. I'll put it in the other intern shells. I think it's already there. If it's not, I'll double check and make sure it is there. It's in the master intern shell that you have access to, but I'll put it in the specific ones if it's not already there. So these are, this is what McReal, which is kind of the standard evaluation system for teachers, and the walkthroughs are built off of in North Carolina and South Carolina. McReal is Robert Marzano. I don't know if y'all knew that or not. Let me say that again. McReal is the Midwestern Consortium. That's Robert Marzano's group. So pretty much everybody works off of Marzano's high yield strategies, whether they call them that or not. The McReal evaluation system for teachers that evaluates their classroom instructional delivery is based off Marzano's 9 high yield strategies. That's pretty much standard throughout the country. And even if yours doesn't look like Marzano's 9, it basically works off of the premise of Marzano's 9.
Right.
So you better become familiar with Marzano. And here, this is really good stuff here. It even tells you what it is and what it looks like in the classroom. But this is a really good cheat sheet for administrators. So I do have this in the intern shell, and if it's not, it's in the master one, because that's where I accessed it. I'll put it in your shells. But yes, you need to know what Marzano is. No, not McGreal. MCREL. Let me Google it for you. If I can get Google to work. Right here, McReal, MC, capital REL, teacher evaluation systems. It's also got the McReal group in here. Here is McReal International. Here it is. Here's their website. They are the standard in personnel evaluation throughout the country. North Carolina based their walkthrough and evaluate system on and actually used the McReal. They've changed the name of it now, but it's still the basis of the evaluation system is McReal. But again, this is Robert Marzano. This was the group that he founded. So there it is. All right. Let me go back to the last question here. Thank you. All right. So this is where everybody starts, is with McReal, Marzano. That's who we start with. He's the person. All right. So again, please remember that what we're doing, growth plan, obviously is a staff development plan. It's a plan for the growth of your teachers. We're growing them into empowered classroom leaders. That's what we're growing them into. And we're not doing it indirectly. We're doing it directly. We are taking steps through our staff development growth plan. We're taking steps to make them better teachers. That's our job, is to hire good people and then grow them. They won't come in being great in the beginning. You know that. Most of them can barely find the building for the first 2 or 3 years. You just hope they show up sober and clean clothes. It's your job to make them into great teachers. You can't just hire good people and go to the office and sit down and put your feet up anymore. Those days are long gone. You've got to work with them to get them to be the great teachers that they have the potential to be. And as we hire more and more people through lateral entry that haven't had any kind of teacher preparation programs, and that's going to be your life going forward. There's going to be more and more and more of those. Teach for America. All the kids that graduated from business school and couldn't find a job, go to Teach for America. Had no classroom training whatsoever. All these lateral entry people that always had a dream of being a teacher and worked in something else and have come to you lateral entry and have had no classes, you're going to get more and more of those. Those of you that work in privates and charters, not being disparaging, but you're going to get a lot more people who don't have a traditional education background as well. And if you're concerned with results, and you should be, you have to be, then you're going to have to basically do teacher training with them. And that's what we're talking about here. Now, my wife worked for 15 years in a magnet school. It was the highest performing school in the state. It should have been. It was a lab school on a campus of Davidson College. They only had 240 kids, the best and the brightest. Out of 140, in a district of 140,000 students, they took the 240 most capable and put them in one school. The most important person in the organization was the custodian. As long as he got the front door open every morning where they could come in, they were going to score on the test. They also had their pick of the faculty, and all of them were highly degreed and certified people, much more than normal. They had the best of the best teachers and the best of the best kids. That's an anomaly. That's an outlier. You're not going to always have the best of the best kids and the best of the best teachers. And one of the things that I would argue is that, we say, well, my school's in a highly affluent area. We're going, our pupil assignment's going to be good, and the best teachers always want to come work here. Well, there's a lot more competition nowadays. Charters and privates and other people that are pulling a lot of the more capable students away from public schools, and even those charters and privates are getting kids that maybe not as capable as they one time were. You're going to have to work harder developing your staff than you ever have before. And that's just an editorial from me is that you're not going to be able to depend upon pupil assignment to save you, getting the best kids and therefore the best teachers wanting to come work at your building. Those are going to be anomaly situations like where my wife worked for 15 years. Those are just going to be anomalies. They're going to be so much an exception. They're not just going to be an exception. They're going to be an anomaly, something that only occurs once in a lifetime kind of thing. You can't bet your career and your future on an anomaly. You need to learn how to develop your faculty because you're not going to get a great one first time out. I'm done.
Dr. Lamb, while we're at it, let's go on to task 4 because they just need to know that that's the rest of what they didn't do in task 1. There's the rest of the competencies. And when we come back online in 2 weeks from now, we'll begin talking to you about pulling all of this together, and then Dr. Lamb probably at that point will begin thinking about the other requirements that you're going to have to do for task stream at that point.
I'll talk to you about putting your competency proofs, your artifacts into your competency folio. You should be ready to do that by then. We'll also probably 2 weeks, probably 2 weeks from tonight, or maybe on a Thursday night, 2 weeks and 2 days from now, I'll introduce the OMA, which we do this summer. Wouldn't be a bad idea to start pulling some of that information together before summer rolls around, remembering that the summer is only 10 weeks long, and you still have to do 9 tasks just like you did this semester, and you only have 10 weeks to do them. And OMA Task 1 is basically a large data collection activity where you have to pull all this information together on your school. So probably 2 weeks and 2 days from tonight, if somebody can look at the calendar, let me see. I will probably at that time, we'll start looking at the OMA. So let's see, April, probably about the 11th. Somewhere in that neighborhood, the 11th, according to where we are.
When we come back, Dr. Lamb, it'll be week 11, and we'll meet on that Tuesday night on the 10th.
Yeah,
And then
we'll
you're
meet on
probably
the
talking
10th.
about the 12th, yes.
Yeah, either the 12th or the 19th, according to how far along we are with the AppTel. But I don't want to leave it too late.
No.
I'll
Well,
do a Thursday night and we'll talk about it. Maybe the 19th before I do it.
and
So it's going to be off a week. Probably be
and
the
a lot,
19th.
yeah, and a lot's going to be determined, and I'll communicate with you about
Mm-hmm.
where the majority of the students are by then. I one of the things that I'm going to be looking at, because you've got 2 weeks, don't forget, I'm going to look at leadership amongst your teams. The teamwork still has to continue. Somebody's got to take the initiative to make sure that those things are happening. I really think that within 2 weeks, because I know how some of you operate, I think, Dr. Lamb, by 2 weeks, many of these students are going to have the AppTel completed or almost completed. I just know how some of them operate, and all of them should be getting close to that place. We told you we're going to cut the apron string some, and that's what we're doing right now. And just seeing how independently you can work over the next couple of weeks. I'm still available. You can send work for me to review. You can send me emails. You can call me if you need to. Text me. I'll call you back. Whatever we need to do over that period of time.
Okay. Last question here. If we do intern hours after this semester is officially over, but before the official beginning of the summer, can those hours count? There is no, for intern hours, you start when you start the program and you end. There is no start and stop. All those hours just keep accumulating. Doesn't matter if we're in session for class or not. You are a full-time intern according to the program outline. You are to be a full-time intern, so the answer is yes, those hours will count. You just keep a log of your hours and just keep on rolling. All right, good question. All right, I will make sure that in my, one more question here.
Yes, Tamara was just saying thank you.
All right, good. I will make sure that in mine and Dr. Hamilton's intern shells that I have the 2 Marzano documents for you. They're in your XM shell, but don't worry about that. I'll put them in our clinical shell. All right, I'm done.
Okay, that's it, Dr. Lamb. They've got a lot to do over the next couple of weeks. Send me work. And have a happy Easter.
Yeah.
Dr. Lamb, you're going to send me the link, right? Okay.